Peters projection map really shows what the continents actually look like. And when you look at the difference between the Peters map here and the Mercator map here, you can see that Africa is much larger, the American hemisphere is much larger, Australia is much larger, and Europe is much smaller. Not that I have anything against them. I'm just trying to be as true to the size of the continents as possible. And when we know that there's no such thing as the continents, because we can see that the continents fit very neatly into each other, and this is in science called Pangea. Our ancestors, the Kemites, called it Ptah. We can see why Africa is in the middle and why Africa would be the place where life would first come, because when this hill rose up out of the waters, it was the African continent, probably that was the one that received the most light and heat energy from the sun, and that light and heat energy would create types of vegetation and life in the waters that would bring forward life. And that at some point in time, there were great eruptions and earthquakes and volcanoes that would separate this one big hill into the continents that we see today. We've just experienced a great upsurge of the earth in ID, and we just got something in Chile this morning. Yeah. And tsunami is on its way very soon, going to hit the planet. And see, what we fail to realize is that if we don't use these as teaching moments, you know, because for me, everybody's talking about Haiti and Port-au-Prince, but I tell my Dominican brothers and sisters, hey, you connected to the island, you better be worried about what's next too. You know, you better be, Puerto Rico better be worried. Central and South America better be worried. See, everybody was worried, and look what happened in Chile this morning. There are fundamental principles happening in the earth that happened in the ancient world. This is the Peters projection map, which is the true fidelity of the earth, as it relates to the pictures taken of the planet and what the continents actually look like, as opposed to the Mercator map, which was basically guesstimations coming from mathematics and possible higher forms of geometry from the ancient Kemites that would make this happen. Now, what began to happen, before we can understand Kush and Kemet and Africa, we look at what's called the Rift Valley. It is a deep crevice in the earth that starts in Mozambique, works its way up the east coast of Africa, the Horn of Africa, moves through the Red Sea into what we today call Israel. Today we call it Israel. Yesterday we called it Palestine. But the day before yesterday we called it Canaan, the Black Land. Don't ever forget that. Okay. The Palestinians are the descendants of the Philistines. The Philistines were the ones that murdered the Canaanites. You ever heard the term, what goes around comes around? That's right. You shall reap what you sow. Be careful whose side you take. Inside the Rift Valley, right at the cornerstone of it, we have what's called the Great Lakes region. The countries that we call Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. Parts of Congo, parts of Southern Africa that go underneath Tanzania would all be the birthplace, the school, the cradle of the human family. There is only one race on the planet. That's right. It's the human race. Human race. And because of biology and because of climatology, this human race was born, nurtured, raised, civilized, and cultured in Africa. That's right. And as Dr. John Henry Clark teaches us, after Africans got their show together, then they took it on the road. So it wasn't about getting intelligent as you got further north. It was about being intelligent and taking that intelligence to the north. All right. Here is a picture of the Peters projection map as it relates to Africa alone. This is the carving up of Africa post-1885. It's very important for us as an African people to understand that just as Professor was discussing earlier about how you can have related people, although they may be called in different countries, when you go to northern Kenya and southern Ethiopia, you have a people known as the Konso people. Same people. But because Britain carved Kenya away from the land that we call Ethiopia, the people to the north are called Ethiopians, and the people to the south are called Kenyans. but the people prior to that called themselves the Conso people. You go to Liberia, and you go to Senegal, Sierra Leone and Liberia, to the west of Africa. To the east and west of both these countries, you have a people known as the Bai people, V-A-I. Same people, same culture, same language. But because Europe carved it up, some are called Sierra Leoneans and the others are called Liberians, but they're the same people. Dr. Wade Nobles, brilliant psychiatrist from California, teaches us power is the ability to define someone's reality and have that person accept that definition as if it were wrong.
And that's why we never
If they say you Liberian and they say you Sierra Leone, but we know we buy. If you say we buy, they have no power. If you know you Conso, they may call you Ethiopian, but you Conso. You're king. But if you say you're Conso, you are what you say you are. You know, not what people call you, it matters what your answer. Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, brilliant Senegalese scholar, shows us in his book, The Cultural Unity of Black Africa, fundamentally his research that shows the movement of these early African people from the early area of the Great Lakes region, and how Africans would travel south and they would travel north. As they traveled north, a big part of northeast Africa going down into the northern part of the Horn, the ancient peoples would be called the Galamantes. G-A-R-A-M-A-N-T-E-S. This comes out of Sheikh Anta Diop's research. Africans would travel to the west to become the Serer, the Tukala, the Dogon of Mali, the Leobe, the Ful, the Bai that we spoke about, the Ashanti, the Kisi, the Yoruba, the Fang. They would move west. So even Nigerians are not indigenous to Nigeria. Ghanaians are not indigenous to Ghana. The only area is called autochthonous, if I'm saying it right. Autochthonous means that you came up out the soil. The only place where folk come up out the soil is Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Every place else they travel to. Here I just want to give us an idea of the Hapi and the sources of the Hapi, coming from what we call the Great Lakes region right around the equator, traveling north. The Hapi River is what the Kemites called it. We today call it Nile. Our ancestors called it Hapi. And that Hapi is the only river on the planet that travels from south to north. In other words, we say here in New York, we're going down south. Kemites would say, I'm going down north and up south because of the flow of the river. You talk about up and down as it relates to the flow of the river. So the river travels from south to north. And so this would be the natural movement of the human family that would travel from south to north. So it makes very good sense why Kemite or Egypt, first of all, Egypt didn't exist until thousands and thousands and thousands of years after the inundation left the soil, because you have the White Nile in the southern part, and it travels, it meanders, it goes up. When it gets to where the Y is, right about here, this is Khartoum. This is where the White Nile and the Blue Nile meet. And it is there that the Blue Nile comes down from Lake Tana and another Lake Atabara, and comes down and meets this white waters with a very rich silt, very dark blue-green silt, and because of that it's called the Blue Nile. And if it weren't for the Blue Nile, the Nile River, Hapi, would stop at Khartoum. It's the power of that water coming down, surging out of the mountains of what we today call Ethiopia, that pushes that water forward and empties out into the Mediterranean. And every time they would have an inundation, every year the water would flow, it would recede back down, and it would leave a little bit more of this rich silt along the banks of this river. And eventually enough silt was left over for it to actually happen, and that's when Mene